In a world of 350 billion movie podcasts, two chumps have decided that now is the time for cult movies to engage in combat. Disagreements will be had, blood may be spilled, and voiceover artists most definitely will not be paid. This is Cult Film Face-Off.
Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Cult Film Face-Off. My name is Chet Roivers. With me as usual is Nick Leonard.
Hello there.
First of all, thank you very much to @AlteredHorror on Twitter for this episode suggestion. Check out alteredhorror.com. It's a cool little horror movie blog. This episode we're going to be actually looking at three films, which we'll explain why in a second. We're looking at Pumpkinhead from 1988, The Hollow from 2004 and The Hollow from 2015. Now, earlier this week, Nick and I had a brief conversation. We don't normally talk about the films we've discussed before, but we had a very brief conversation about The Hollow, and it became apparent that we'd watched two completely different films. This is my fault primarily because I didn't ask for clarification, so we've ended up watching three films instead of two, but it's fine.
We'll dissect all the motherfuckers.
Exactly. Okay. Okay. We'll start off in chronological order as we always do. We'll start with Pumpkinhead from 1988, directed by Stan Winston. Following a tragic accident, a vengeful, bereaved man summons an ancient demon to dispatch a visiting group of teenagers. Pumpkinhead.
Now it begins. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, they say that an act of evil shall never go unpunished. There they tell of a creature who shall come from nowhere, born from the blood of the innocent, to hunt the guilty, and they call it Pumpkinhead. They are strangers here, and what began as harmless fun ended in tragedy. Anger.
What was an accident?
And revenge.
It's what you wanted. You gonna stop? He's gotta run his course.
Now the spell has been cast. The terror is loose. The horror is here. Pumpkinhead.
Okay, this was my first time watching Pumpkinhead. Never seen it before. How about you?
Yes, I'd seen it before. I saw it at university. I've seen it at least twice before, but it's been some 20 years since I saw it.
How does it hold up?
It's a really atmospheric horror film. It's a slasher, but what elevates it from being just your kind of run-of-the-mill slasher is that it's got way more atmosphere and it has way more backstory. Stan Winston directed this. It's his first film. He directed it and he wrote it. He's famous for being a special effects genius. He worked on Terminator 2, AI, Iron Man, Aliens. This is evidently a film made by somebody who loves monsters and loves creatures. The Pumpkinhead of design, Pumpkinhead looks like a cross between H.R. Geiger, Alien, and E.T.
Yeah.
It establishes itself, goes back to 1957, does a very nice atmospheric opening sequence, which I really enjoyed. It had drama, it was intriguing, and it set it up really well. Lance Henriksen is really good in this movie. I really bought into the relationship with him and his son. You mentioned before when we were looking at Silent Night, Deadly Night, that felt to you like a fairy tale. This is a fairy tale. This is otherworldly. I really like the way it was lit. The cinematographer is a guy. He does great work on this, called Bojan Bazelli, who worked, I think most recently, he did the American version of Ring.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Which is not a great film, but it looks really good. So his lighting is wicked. It's very over-stylized. It lends that whole kind of... It really helps the atmosphere of the movie. What are your initial thoughts of it?
I think it's very, very, very much a film of two halves. I do agree with you in a parallel universe. In a parallel universe, Lance Henriksen is like a superstar because he's so terrific. And even when his character sort of halfway through does this slightly inexplicable U-turn, he completely sells it, even though it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense dramatically. It is as atmospheric as hell, like you said. And I also love the fact that you don't really know where you are. There's almost no evidence whatsoever of a world outside of this small, tiny patch of desert. And yes, it's set in the 80s. It was filmed in the 80s, but kind of when is it? It's and it is based on a poem.
That's why it's got that otherworldliness about it. It's set in its own entire world.
I agree, absolutely. It's as vivid and ethereal as a poem, and it was based on a poem, and I love that aspect of it. I love the way Stan Winston shoots kids at their eye level. I love the way he uses a kind of aggressive stabs on the soundtrack. Not for the sake of mining cheap shocks, but to kind of make you feel uneasy. I felt really on edge for the first half of the film. So I mean, it's kind of a knockout as a directorial debut and as a stylistic exercise as well. But I just found myself wondering after the halfway point had passed, why did they have this generic bunch of kids, this sort of standard revenge plot? And the monster I thought was really uninspiring. It was just basically a pink xenomorph. The animatronic effects were great, but I thought the beast was quite uninspired, to be honest. And when it became it does become a slasher film halfway through. I just found myself getting quite bored because it is as cat-handed and dull as any Friday the 13th film. And the idea of this massive... It's almost like a dragon, this massive beast prowling around like Michael Myers in the shadows, waiting to pounce. It's such a waste. It's the least interesting path they could have gone down, I think.
I think how I feel about it is that I wish they just made way more of the kills. The kills were pretty mundane.
Yeah, totally.
There's kind of a nice bit where he kind of carves a sort of symbol on one of the victims' heads. There's a fairly nice bit where one of the victims is taken up really, really high and thrown down, and that looks pretty cool. But the kills were I know what you mean about a film of two halves, because it does kind of it gets stuck in a gear in the second half, which it builds up so much atmosphere and so much care and attention to get to that, there are such great sequences in that first half. I love the difference in kind of the shots and the lighting in the atmosphere when he's with his son and it's very kind of sepia lit, very warm, and then you flip that on the scene, which is probably one of my favourite scenes, is when Lance Henriksen goes to the cabin of Haggis to kind of make his deal with the devil, basically, and how it's basically like hell on earth, that little cottage. But then it's kind of the teens are getting killed off, and I really wanted far more of those kills, and it kind of just got stuck in a gear. It's quite a nice little touch that basically Henriksen has because of this pact that he's made, is that he feels all the kills. And basically, they've got it off him to kind of to destroy the creature. I thought that was quite a nice touch, but yeah, I was disappointed in how it culminates in that second half.
Yeah, and the teenagers that are the Pumpkinhead's prey, they're less interesting even than some of the kids in the Friday the 13th. One of them's a drunken thug, one of them's a hypersensitive sort of. I mean, that's it.
There's no characteristics at all. The females had absolutely. They were just completely superfluous.
It was just. I mean, I just didn't care. I mean, great kills would have enlivened things a lot, but
well, great kills kind of make up for the fact that
you don't care about.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
and they didn't have that.
It also didn't help that this isn't exactly primo acting talent. This is not a great cast, to be sure. And also, what I was saying earlier about the fact that it used the soundtrack to make you feel sort of tense and uneasy. In the second half, it is using the audio to just make you jump. And by the end, there's a bit where a dog jumps on someone's lap. I was like, come on. That's when it's clear that everyone's out of ideas, when it starts going down those avenues. I just think it's a frustrating and half brilliant kind of a washout, but it does look terrific, like you said, even now, and it is hugely distinctive, I think. If they'd have concocted something more interesting to do with the monster, this could have started a franchise, I reckon. But
well, there is a sequel, which I haven't seen.
I didn't even know there was one. No.
Yeah, there is Pumpkinhead. There is Pumpkinhead 2, which well, from looking at reviews, I remember looking at reviews when I saw the first Pumpkinhead, and it got absolutely slated. But I would be interested to see what they did with the creature. The creature has potential. I mean, when you first see that creature in that kind of in the exposition kind of story at the beginning, and they just give you a flash of it, you go, fuck. That's really quite a powerful. Well, you just get a little kind of taste of like, oh wow, it's going to stalk and stuff. And it's not. It's quite a cumbersome beast. It doesn't move very quickly. It kind of lumbers about a bit. I did quite like. I mean, you can tell that this is somebody who's kind of very much in love. The special effects crew who worked with Stan Winston were very in love with that creature, because there is a nice scene where Pumpkinhead's walking through, and it's kind of lit with, it's almost like kind of strobe lighting with him walking through a certain section of like an isolated barn, which I liked. Yeah, I mean, because I've got that relationship with the film, I just enjoyed going back to it. It did droop in that second half, and the kills are frustratingly unimaginative. But I just love being in that world, and there's some great character actors in there as well. I really like Haggis. Haggis, if it was done by another actress, could have been really hammy. I think she nails that. Florence Schaefer, who's obviously got a lot of prosthetics on, but it doesn't mask the fact of her menace. It kind of elevates it, which I really liked. And then you've got Buck Flower, who's a brilliant character actor that pops up in Children of the Corn.
Isn't he the homeless guy in Back to the Future?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean the actor. All those three performances are great, and that's why it's very, very. It's unusually jarring how bad the kids are, how nondescript and uninspiring those performances are. But
silly folk.
I can't really judge the monster. I thought it was quite uninspiring, but then it's because they didn't do anything with it.
I didn't think it looked uninspiring. I thought it's a captivating looking creature.
Oh, I don't know. It just felt like this was kind of like like I said, like a pink xenomorph.
But the thing is, though, nothing is as scary on the screen as Lance Henriksen's face.
That's very true.
I mean, going back to Lance Henriksen is the strongest thing in this movie. I mean, he went pretty fucking method on the character. He got a set of hillbilly dentures made, and he trawled loads of thrift shops to get the coins and the kind of the antiquities that he pays Haggis with in that scene as well.
Yeah, I love Lance Henriksen. He's not in enough films and never really has been.
He's got a brilliant biography as well. His biography that came out about 10 years ago is well worth a read. It's really good.
I've got it here. It was a gift from you.
Ah, so you read it?
No, it's one of those. Actually, I think I read half of it where he's hitchhiking around America. Very, very interesting. And I don't know why I stopped reading it, but I'll go back to it. But this film, I feel like a Friday the 13th film with a pink dragon is still Friday the 13th.
A pink dragon?
Well, he kind of looks like a pink dragon, doesn't it?
He looks like a cross between. Well, he's basically E.T. and an alien.
But kind of pink.
Well, he's a bit pink.
But yeah, I'd say I'm having a bit of a pop at it, but I really did love the first half. I think the first half is like...
It's a slasher film, but actually what it is, if you strip it back, it's a morality play. That revenge is not, basically his revenge is futile because it doesn't fill the void of him losing his son.
Yeah, of course, yeah. No, it's a beautifully simple story. That's why I wish it was half an hour shorter, then it wouldn't have been released theatrically. I know it's a stupid thing to say, but... Yeah, no, there's lots to like about this. There's just also lots to... I'm just disappointed in this film more than anything. I was so disappointed for the second half that it let me down. But it's worth... I'd say turn it on, watch the first half and then turn it off. Although no one will do that.
No, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't... Yeah, it's a weaker second half, but this film is definitely worth checking out. There's more than enough in it to recommend it.
It's definitely worth checking out. I'll go with that. Let's move on to The Hollow from 2004, directed by Kyle Newman. When the mythical Headless Horseman returns to the small town of Sleepy Hollow on Halloween night, it is up to the distant blood relative of Ichabod Crane to save the town and stop the Horseman from settling his centuries-old score. The Hollow.
You said you wanted a scare, right? Well, I'm gonna give you one. All it would take is one bad Halloween. Like maybe 3 kids go into a graveyard and only one comes back.
Who's that? Did you hear that? The hell was that?
Oh my God, help me, please, guys.
You jerk.
It was just a joke.
It's not funny, Scott.
This is real. This Halloween,
That is real.
heads
What the hell are you talking about?
will roll. Nick Carter,
Oh my God.
Kaylee Kuko, Kevin Zigers. The legend lives. The Hollow.
Okay, so The Hollow 2004 edition. This is the film that I watched and you didn't, and then you've subsequently watched it. I had not seen or heard of this, so this was my first time watching it. Your first time?
First time watching it.
What did you make of The Hollow 2004 edition?
This is a fucking terrible film.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the film starts. You've got Stacey Keach and you've got Judge Reinhold.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's two actors who popped up in various films when I was a kid. I was like, okay, and then the film opens with a group of like criminally thick-headed teenagers, completely void of any personality. The dialogue was terrible, and the whole thing was like wading through really dry, sludgy cement. This whole film was just a fucking chore to watch.
Yeah. At least you get that warning, because it does open with, and you get to know these. I mean, they are quintessential American shitheads, and you know that they're shitheads because they're wearing those shithead jackets. Are they just called baseball jackets?
No, are they called varsity jackets? Are they?
Oh, maybe, yeah. I mean, I think they're synonymous with baseball, but I always feel bad for whoever designed those, because 100 years ago or whatever, somebody thought that was a great emblem for a great sport, and now it's just the ultimate shorthand for when someone's a shithead. But what amazes me is the film starts and these shitheads disrupt this public telling of the Ichabod Crane story, and shortly afterwards, it's established that one of the non-shithead characters, who the shitheads don't like, is actually a descendant of Ichabod Crane. And then once they've established that, nothing happens. This is a film in which almost nothing happens. It's a high school romance, and there's the most unbelievably tedious shit. Like there's a kid who isn't sporty and his dad wants him to play football. I mean, this film really tested my desire to carry on living. It's a film for very, very young kids.
I felt sorry for any young kid that had the misfortune. I just imagine some like parents renting this for their kid on Halloween, and this kid. Well, I don't know.
You can watch anything when you're a kid and love it, can't you?
I wouldn't have loved this as a kid.
You don't think? I reckon if you were probably 5, 6, 7, 8.
Fuck no. When I was probably about 6 or 7 years of age, I watched this Disney version of The Headless Horseman, Ichabod Crane.
Yeah.
That had more chills and atmosphere in a 15-minute Disney animation than the 90 minutes of this film.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's awful. There was one half decent shot at the beginning. Ichabod Crane, I mean, the fucking the creature, the baddie in this is fucking terrible. He's got like basically an oversized pumpkin head. Never did the Headless Horseman, look like this. I mean,
but there was a time where the Headless Horseman would have a pumpkin in place of his head, but this isn't a pumpkin. It's a gigantic pumpkin.
It's like the size of one of those kids' bouncers. What are they called? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but it's to disguise the fact there's someone with a head underneath it, which completely ruins the illusion. Because...
Well, that's exactly. The whole creepy thing is that he doesn't have a head. In this, he has just a massive fucking pumpkin head.
Yeah.
So there's a bit where the first time you're introduced to this fucking travesty of a baddie, and he has flaming skulls for eyes, and then it's actually an all right cut, and it transitions to headlights of a car.
Oh yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah.
That was all right. Stacey, I mean, fucking hell, the best thing about this film is Stacey Keach doing a fucking salty sea dog pirate impression throughout the whole film.
He just periodically pops up to chow the fuck down on all of the scenery like a motherfucker. And ever danger's coming and nobody believes him, and he's that guy. I didn't. One of the Backstreet Boys is in this. Nick Carter.
Nick Carter plays the arrogant jock.
Yeah, I mean, he does play an absolute wanker with a decent level of conviction. Although at first I didn't realise it was him. I mean, I'm not a Backstreet Boys expert or anything, but it's clear that they filmed him to kind of disguise. He looked quite heavy set in this. I mean, he looked quite big. I mean, you remember him being this boyish pop star, and he looked like he was quite chunky. And the camera seemed to be trying to disguise that, I thought. But yeah, he was. I think he was 25 or 26 when he shot this, and he can pass for like 17, 18. So
I've no doubt that he was any older than the rest of the cast.
Yeah.
Judge Reinhold, who I held in such high esteem from the Beverly Hills Cop movies. I mean, he doesn't fax his performance in so much as it's so wispy and non-committal. It's more like he just traced it in.
Yeah, I reckon a friend of a friend popped in while he was making some TV show and said, "Could you just go and do a day on this film just for a few quid?" And he just did it because
it is the most non-committal performance. I mean, he just doesn't want to be. He's got no interest in this movie, and it's just really dumb. There's a scene towards the end where he plays the most least convincing guy trying to get his end away with his wife.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, "Well, somebody told me girls get horny when they're scared. Well, it worked." Yes, it did. I mean, they look so uncomfortable. He's actually got his arm around her, but he's not actually linked his hand to her arm. He looks completely uncomfortable. And then when the fucking massive pumpkin cunt horseman smashes through an entire glass door, Reinhold's response is, "Damn those kids."
I mean, to be honest, Judge Reinhold
it's such a fucking dumb movie.
Did you have a favourite scene?
No, I didn't have a. So I had a favourite shot, which is I talked about earlier. I didn't have a favourite scene.
My favourite scene, or the only scene that could possibly have been my favourite, is where Nick Carter. There's a hayride, right? Which I'd never heard that term before. It's kind of like a hayride. You know, that they get all these kids get on this sort of cart and go down. It's kind of like a ghost train. You know, the whole ghost train thing that they're doing on this. It's called a hayride. Yeah. And actually, to be fair, it's actually a pretty good one. There's bodies hanging from trees and stuff as they drive around.
Right.
Nick Carter turns up dressed as a headless horseman, and he scares the shit out of the children. And then his ex-girlfriend goes apeshit. What? You're going to scare the shit out of the children? Which is the whole point. I think he even says, "Well, why do you think we're here?" What a reason for a girlfriend to get pissed off, or an ex-girlfriend to get pissed off that he tried to scare kids when they were on this ride to try and scare the shit out of themselves. That's about as amazing as any. I mean, talk about grasping at straws. Kaylee Cuoco, I think that's her name. She's now making like $6 billion an episode on Big Bang Theory. She's really actually quite good. Like, she's clearly.
Which character is she?
She was basically the lead. She was the cheerleader who was going out with Nick Carter, and then she went out with the guy who was Ichabod Crane's son. The main character. She was actually very good, especially in comparison to everyone else in the cast. The weird thing about this is this was made for ABC Family, I think the channel was, the American cable station, which specialises in family movies. But there must be different versions of this, because the UK version is 15 Certificate, which is the one I watched. And there's a fairly explicit oral sex scene in it.
Yeah.
Didn't you think that was weird? Because, I mean, this is a kids' film from
I agree. That was out of place. And I also think for a kids' film, I mean, there's the decapitation when he slices the head off. I mean, that's not child friendly.
I don't even remember that.
That is my favourite scene. Is basically a big group of kids are in a truck or something, and then basically the massive Pumpkinhead comes galloping on his horse, and he just slices the head off, and then they all clap and applaud.
Oh, well, that bit, of course.
They think it's part of the show. And then Nick Carter rocks up on his horse, and then obviously the penny drops that that's not Nick Carter. That was my favourite scene. But also just very... That was that's not kid friendly. That was it was a decapitation done, medium range. But in no way, shape, or form is that child friendly.
The most effective moment that I thought in this film was when they discover those human heads and they've got candles in them.
Yeah.
It's sort of like human jack-o'-lanterns. That was kind of...
Yeah, that was a bit nasty as well, but it was certainly not child-friendly.
This is what I don't understand. So they must have shot... I guess they must have... This must be a different version. There's no way this could have aired on our channel called ABC Family with these sort of sex references and mild bloodshed. So there must be two different.
There must have this must be like the director's cut.
The director seems to be primarily known for doing like Lana Del Rey videos and Taylor Swift videos.
Yeah, the last thing he did was he directed Taylor Swift's Style music video.
I mean, this is a film that's not so much directed as documented, because the presence of a director's barely felt at all. But then this is really, really low-rent television. I'm not familiar with a lot of cheap kids' TV movies, so maybe this excels among that kind of company. But it's just a time waster for kids.
I feel sorry for any kids that were subjected to this. And, I'd stay away from this like a hefty dose of the clap.
I reckon if I saw this at maybe 6, 7, I would have thought it was okay. And it was absolute crap.
If I was like 4 and didn't know what was going on, I think I'd be all right with it.
There's, when you go back to films that you watched when you were like 5, 6, 7, I mean, and you'll always have a soft spot for them, but I think I could probably. This is the only audience that could possibly get anything out of this film, because it is absolute crap. It really halfway through I was like, I can't get to the end of this.
No, I mean, it's a horrendous piece of shit. This movie, I can't overemphasize it enough.
Okay, all right. Well, onwards and hopefully upwards. Then let's go on to the film that you watched first, The Hollow from 2015. This is also known as The Burning Curse in a lot of places, but it was shot as The Hollow. So directed by Sheldon Wilson. As 3 sisters arrive on a remote island to visit an estranged relative, a mysterious creature begins killing the island's residents one by one, and the sisters realise that their only hope involves staying alive until dawn. The Hollow, 2015.
Where the hell are we gonna go? We'll find help in town.
Not another sound. We'll stay here for the night.
What's killing everyone out there?
The storm brought something with it. Something evil.
So how do we kill it?
We don't. We survive it.
Okay, so the second film called The Hollow. I had not seen this before. I fucking wish I hadn't seen it now. How did you like The Hollow?
Why couldn't we have done Hollow Man?
Anything but these two.
Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah,
I mean, there are so many more movies with Hollow in the title that are so much better than this.
We have no choice but to go with what our audience dictates, unfortunately. That's the contract we've got.
No, fair enough. So I can't remember the last time that I was thrown so many terribly conceived jump scares in the first 10 minutes. There must be about 3 or 4. All terrible, all completely missed the mark. You're introduced to a trio of sisters, 3 sisters, whose stupidness and ditziness, I mean, none of them can act for toffee. I didn't buy for 2 seconds the relationship. None of them felt sisterly or anything like that at all. One was just really passive-aggressive the whole time, and the other 2 were just not fleshed out characters at all. They got on my tits fucking from the off.
What really hurts this film is the dialogue is comprised of just really uninteresting bickering that's packed with it. I can't remember the last time that I saw so much exposition in the dialogue. There's the 3 sisters at one point have an argument near the beginning. One of them storms off, and then the 2 sisters stay in conversation. One of them says, "Oh, she'll be fine," and the other one says, "Well, she watched her parents burn to death. She won't be fine." It's like, you all know that. It was one of those movies where they keep telling each other things that we just so we need to know. There's someone says at one point when they're doing a bandage up or something, she says, "Oh, my 3 months in medical school won't cut it here." It's so lazy.
It's really lazy storytelling.
Yeah,
and that features throughout and continues when they meet a bunch of guys from the town who give us the exposition of the storm hitting, something evil was there. I mean, really overacting, going from being very croaky and very serious to being very, very shouty. Really poorly written and directed.
Yeah, it's. I mean, another bit that I remember just thinking, for God's sake, they're having two of the sisters are having a conversation, and one of them's holding a hose, and I did think, I wonder what that's for, thinking they'd use it to tie someone up or something, and then she says, "What are you doing with that hose?" And she said, "Oh, let's go to that car over there and siphon some petrol out of it." And the next scene is them going to do that. It's full of stuff that you don't need to know, that should be told through visually, rather than you're just being told literally what's happening. I don't know how this got greenlit, to be honest. Even a genius director couldn't have breathed life into this script. I mean, both of these Hollow movies suggest that it's kind of easy to get shit made on American TV. I mean, the 2015 version of The Hollow, The Burning Curse or whatever it was called, it has a $2 million budget, apparently.
What?
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it looks.
Is that how much the CGI cost?
Probably, yeah. I mean, it's all shot digitally, but yeah, I didn't think the CGI was terrible, to be honest.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The budget went on the CGI.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah. I should imagine.
I mean, there's no name actor. I think apparently. Well, I did recognise
Deborah Kara Unger at the beginning.
Yeah, what's she been in?
She was in Crash, the Cronenberg film.
Ah, yes. Yeah. She's had a lot of work done.
I didn't know. She's always had a very unusual face. I didn't think that when I saw her. She hasn't been.
She shouldn't go near a lit flame.
You reckon? I didn't think that. Yeah, she hasn't been in stuff for a while, but she's been in loads of great films. She was in The Game as well, the Fincher film.
I love The Game.
This is another one of those horror films where I just want to know what this thing's powers are. Apparently, it can teleport wherever it wants to, but there's one scene where they show it retreating into a ceiling crawl space at the same time as sort of disappearing, and then it's underneath a car outside. And I was like, why did you bother? And then it gets into a freezer later on through a small water grate in the floor. So it has to get in through. I just don't know. And also, at one point, it's scared off by a naked flame, and it's kind of comprised of. It's like burning branches. Why is it worried about fire?
I think that's linking to the fact that the burning of the witches. It's got a little bit of a bit of a chip on its shoulder from the naked flame.
Yeah, but it's so weird that
even though it's made of fire.
Exactly. I mean, of all the that's worse than at the end of Signs when it comes to those aliens coming in. It's like, oh, they don't like water. Of all the planets they could have.
I mean, it's a complete bunch of arse.
Also, the reason this creature goes into a freezer in the first place is because a couple of characters think that the best thing for them to do is hide in a freezer until the next day, which is when this curse will be lifted. But a freezer would surely kill them way faster than their fucking demon. You can't live for a freezer for longer than about half an hour, can you?
No.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
When you do find out what's going on and why this beast is attacking this island, it's really hackneyed and really underwhelming. I mean, some women were burned for witchcraft 100 years ago, and there was a storm when they were burned and they disappeared into the storm, and now every 100 years they come and just kill everyone on the island. I think it would have been better to start with a sort of spook, the way Pumpkinhead does, to start with a flashback so you're intrigued from the beginning.
Give it some context. Go back to those witches getting burned at that spot. I mean, to do something that actually links to a location. I mean, they did. There's a part in this which is just completely nonsensical when they're looking at a map, and one of the characters just goes, "It's the power station."
Yeah, let's go to the power station, the disused power station.
She just had a hunch.
Yeah, I mean, do you know why they went to the power station?
Because that was the point. That was the spot where the witches got burnt.
What? Did they even reveal? They never even said that in the dialogue, did they?
It alludes to it later on.
Oh, okay. I completely.
So it just happened to be. Oh, it's got to be the power station. Yes, that's the spot where the witches were burnt.
I thought the only reason they went to the power station is so that one of the sisters can accidentally channel a bolt of lightning into a spear and then stab the beast with it at the end, which is not the kind of thing you can necessarily plan for.
No, or planning for the fact that suddenly it's completely sunrise within a matter of seconds.
When you watch a film like this and they keep everything hidden, you think, oh, there's going to be a twist or there's going to be some really dramatic reveal. And then they just tell you, oh, yeah, there's some curse for years ago. You're like, is that it? We've been sitting here waiting for something to happen, and that's it. A fucking story that any member of an audience watching this film could have concocted in 5 minutes.
But also the fact that one of the characters goes, as long as we're quiet, we're going to be okay. but then the other character keeps screaming the whole time. If they just kept quiet, it wouldn't have found them.
And then there's one scene where they're in a room and the Beast is cowering on the other side of the wall, waiting for them to touch this map so it can burst through. The thing that really, really made me sick about this film is that everything is a distraction. It's so frustrating to watch that it made me feel a little bit ill. It's trying to distract you from the fact that there's no plot, that the central characters don't ever once come up with a plan. Something happens, they run. And the monster's not defined particularly well ever. Basically, this film plays out like this. Every few minutes, there's an idiotic and completely consequence-free argument of some kind, or someone suddenly screams because this beast has got a hold of their ankle, and then they run away.
Yeah, there's lots of pulling of an ankle and being dragged out of shot.
Yeah, and then they run away, and then a few minutes after that, there'll be an idiotic and consequence-free argument, and someone will scream. Because it just keeps repeating itself. This is a staggeringly bad film, badly written, badly directed. I didn't think the Three Sisters were that bad in comparison to the male actors in it, who were really just like amped up and way over the top. But when we spoke briefly the other day, I was convinced that my Hollow was worse than yours, and you were convinced that yours was mine. This film, I don't think has anything to recommend it, bar some decent CGI.
The only other thing I'd say as well, I didn't mind the whole sweeping aerial shots over the woodland. But that is all I'm giving it. I mean, I tell you what this kind of reminded me of, and a film that does it so much better is Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah, and I don't even like that film, but it's way too...
The first half an hour of Jeepers Creepers is great, and then it just goes completely downhill. But the first half an hour of Jeepers Creepers is great.
Yeah, it's... this was a dispiriting, fucking irritating film to watch. I also didn't understand why, when they've established that this is the spirits of 3 or 6 dead girls, or whoever, these women that got killed for witchcraft, they keep calling the beast a son of a bitch. I thought it was supposed to be these spirits, or is it just supposed to be a bloke because it kind of vaguely looks like a bloke? They keep, you son of a bitch, you son of a bitch. This, I was like, what?
It just doesn't make it. There's no kind of I mean, it is just stuff happens. Things are really fudged through clumsy dialogue. Nobody can act in this film. The acting is atrocious. Wall to wall, terrible acting.
I kind of felt bad for the girls playing the sisters, because they have. I mean, nobody has anything to work with, and people just do. I mean, I'll tell you exactly what this film's like. You know those festivals they have where people go and you're just supposed to make. You've got a 24-hour film festival where you just make something on the spot. It's exactly like that. There's no logic, there's no care for anything, there's no care for the audience. I don't know who could ever watch this and be even compelled to finish it. I would have 10 minutes of this would have been more than enough for me, unless we had to do it for this. I hate it. I mean, it's unspeakably bad, this. Really, really is.
It's the worst. I said it to you when we briefly spoke about this and before. This, hands down, is the worst film I have seen since doing this podcast.
Yeah, it's everything about it.
It's an abomination of a movie.
It's so lazy as well. Everything about it's lazy, and it got funded to the tune.
And it's cynical as well. It's a cynical, cheap. Yeah. I mean, I'm exhausted even talking any more about it.
Yeah, I hated it. I fucking hated it. Okay, so if we're picking the best film from this trio, where do we go?
Pumpkinhead.
Okay, I totally agree. Pumpkinhead is far and away. It shouldn't have. This should just be Pumpkinhead versus nothing, because the other two films are not fit to polish Pumpkinhead's shoes. But if we have to pick a runner-up. Which of the two Hollows is better?
I mean, the children's Disney one.
I don't want to undersell how much I fucking hated that as well. I hated both of these, and they really genuinely made me feel a little bit unwell. But yeah, just because it wasn't as hatefully bad as 2015.
The Hollow that we just spoken about annoyed me Yeah. Whereas the other Hollow, I was just like, well, this is just fucking shit. This annoyed me.
That the 2015 one is hatefully bad. The 2004 one is just it's also terrible. But yeah, basically, never watch a film called The Hollow. That's the short and tall of it.
Stick to Hollow Man.
Yeah, and Pumpkinhead. But yeah, okay, that's us. Finished. Thank you very much for listening to this. As usual, check us out on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all of that stuff. If you enjoy this, do give us a review on iTunes. That really helps us out. And yeah, thanks very much for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Take it easy.
Ciao, Pascal.
Cult film face-off.
Looking for an old woman. She lives somewhere in the mountains hereabouts. Some folks would say as how she's got powers.
I never heard no such woman.
The script came into my house, and it said Pumpkinhead on it, and I thought, what is this, Ichabod Crane? You know, I mean, a guy with a pumpkin on his head. And I thought, oh man, it took me a couple of hours before I would open it. But my agent had said, you got to read this. And so I read it. And there was one scene in it, I mean, I liked it, but there was one scene in it about, you know, like a halfway through or a third of the way through it, where my son is already dead, and he's on the seat in the truck beside me, and he sits up and he says, what are you doing, Dad? Why? Why are you doing this? And it really scared the hell out of me. I mean, while I was reading it alone at night, you know, the hair on my neck stood up, and I thought, that scene, only that scene was what made me want to do the movie.